Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 5 of Summer Tomato Live. Summer Tomato Live is your interactive online classroom where I tell you all you need to know about the food and health topics that you voted are the most important. I'm your host, Daria Pino, creator of the website Summer Tomato. We can find even more healthy eating tips for food lovers. Summer Tomato is also where you can go to find any of the show notes that I mentioned during the show, and I will post those next week when this episode goes live to the rest of the world. And I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of questions when I give the presentation on dairy today. So if you have any questions, there's a little red Ask a Question button in the corner. So go ahead and use that, and you can either submit a text question or a video question, which I'd love to talk to you. Make sure you have headphones, though. Otherwise, there's horrible feedback. But I will get to those questions at the end of the show. And keep in mind that you can only ask one at a time. So whatever the last question you asked is the one that I will see, and wait until I've answered your question or deleted it from the queue before you add another question. And if you aren't watching live, but you want to participate in future episodes, you can sign up at tinyletter.com/summertomato, which is the URL at the bottom of the screen. The next live show I've scheduled for Tuesday, April 11th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and the topic is going to be probiotics. I'm so stoked that you guys picked this because I've been really wanting to spend a lot more time researching it, and I've found that probiotics have been very helpful for me lately. I used to have a lot of stomach problems that were completely resolved by them, so I can't wait to talk more about that. And if you don't know what probiotics are, basically they come with foods that have been fermented, like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, and stuff like that. So it should be a great discussion. Tuesday, April 26th. I said April 11th. That's today. It's April 26th. And also, I'm going to be holding office hours tomorrow at 1 p.m. if you guys have any questions or want to hang out with me then. And that's, of course, Pacific time as well. I'll just be hanging out, answering questions, anything you want to chat about. We can troubleshoot your diets or just, talk about how, the Lakers are doing horrible or whether or not the Bulls can beat the Celtics or anything like that. Awesome. So let's get started about dairy since we lost a lot of time already. So I just want to start by saying that this is a really difficult topic to research. And the reason is because there's a ton of politics surrounding dairy. And that's because there's massive, massive amounts of money in the dairy industry trying to get science to say that it's healthy for you. So it's really difficult to interpret studies that have been funded by anybody from any dairy association or any company associated with any industry in dairy. And this is really obvious if you start really reading the scientific literature, because you start to just see people ignore studies that were done by one company, or they'll only emphasize other studies that support their case. Oh, it's not working anymore? Shoot. Hold on. So what I was saying is that the politics of dairy make it really difficult to interpret the studies. So keep in mind that even somebody who's looking, like me, who's going through the literature looking for quality studies with, no conflict of interest, even these studies, it's still difficult to interpret. So I did my best. So let me just give you a quick example. So there's some discussion that maybe milk causes type 1 diabetes in babies. And so I went through the literature and I found a really interesting review, which I will post in the show notes, about how this story is nonsense and there's no way that the data is just not credible that this protein causes type 1 diabetes. And it sounded really credible, and I looked through and it didn't say there was any funding issues or anything. But then there were some comments on that review by other scientists who saw it, and they were like, well, we don't understand why this guy's leaving out all this data. And by the way, he's putting a lot of emphasis on this data from this one company. But the way he laid it out in the original review was that it was another company. So it was like two companies sponsoring two different kinds of data that said different things, and they were fighting with each other in one of the most respected scientific journals, Nature. And so, I read through these things and I'm like, I don't know who to believe. I mean, it's really hard. So that's just sort of what we're dealing with. So anyway, let's talk about the most common assumptions about dairy and the biggest questions that come up. So, and all the misunderstandings and the confusion. So one of the biggest reasons that most people will tell you that milk and dairy is good for you is that it gives you strong bones, right? It prevents osteoporosis. That's what everyone says. Problem is, when you go through and look at the data, it's not super clear that that's true. So, for example, so I actually have something right here. So this is a book I really enjoy called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy by Walter Willett. It's not perfect. He leaves out a lot of stuff, but he's an honest scientist, and I like this book. It's good for intro to nutrition if anybody wants it. And he published this graph in here of countries and their rates of hip fracture. And if you look, and I couldn't find this anywhere else except for in this book. I don't know if you can see it here. Let me see. Anyway, it's a pretty nice graph. Let me see, right? Going that way, right? And what it's actually showing is on the x-axis is how much calcium these countries consume, and on the y-axis is how many fractures they get. And it turns out that the more calcium that people are getting, the more fractures they have, which is sort of counterintuitive to what you would expect based on what milk does a body good and what they tell us in school campaigns say. Of course, dairies fund school education as well. So it turns out that, you know, if you look country by country, which is not the best way to analyze data at all. In fact, it's really a pretty bad way. But, you know, you would predict that if milk helped, or that if calcium helped with osteoporosis and with fractures, then that graph would go with the other direction, and it does not. So then you get into the question, well, what's up? What's going on with this? Don't your bones need calcium and vitamin D? And the answer is yes, they do. It's just you don't necessarily need to get that calcium from milk. In fact, 75%, I mean, there's estimates are all over the place, but a large percentage of the population of the planet Earth is lactose intolerant. They can't ingest dairy at all. So you definitely, and there's plenty of healthy countries. We're not the best example of health here in America or in other Western countries. So you definitely don't need the calcium in milk to be healthy or prevent osteoporosis. Will it help, though, if you do? Maybe. So there's some evidence that maybe you can improve bone mineral density and decrease fractures with calcium, so long as there's calcium with vitamin D. And this is really important because it turns out that if you take calcium supplements without vitamin D, it actually increases your risk of fracture. Your bones become brittle, even though they do improve in bone mineral density. It's still not as it's not what you want, and it doesn't prevent fractures. So, you know, the data is kind of all over the place. So if you're lacking in calcium and vitamin D, milk can provide a little bit of that, but probably not enough. So I wouldn't rely on milk at all as a prevention of osteoporosis. So that's my advice on that. And I don't believe people who say otherwise. And so something else that was interesting too is that it turns out that the story is it's a lot more complicated than just calcium and even calcium and vitamin D. And some of the newer studies are showing that even fruits and vegetables, consumption of fruits and vegetables is associated with stronger bones, as is protein, which is interesting because for a long time people were saying that protein leaches calcium from bones. Vegetarians say this all the time. But the most recent studies I've found that tested it better with better methods and more carefully designed studies showed that diets with high acidity, which are the ones that they say are a problem for people with osteoporosis, it actually is not a factor. And I'm going to give you all the scientific links to all this because I know I'm saying a lot of things that are very counterintuitive. I have all the studies and all the references that I'm going to post in the show notes for you to check out for yourself. And if you want to have a discussion about whether or not you believe me, I would love to have that because, like I said, it's hard for me to figure this stuff out for myself. But it sounds to me like protein is fine. It's not a problem. It doesn't make osteoporosis worse. In fact, it looks like it helps it. Vitamin D is probably the most important thing, but milk isn't a very good source of vitamin D. It's an okay source. For most people, it's their best source because they don't take pills or get enough sun, but I recommend getting enough sun whenever possible and vitamin D supplements if osteoporosis is what you're worried about. And, of course, healthy diet and exercise, because exercise is really important for osteoporosis. It makes your bones stronger. Impact exercise. So there goes one myth out the window. The next one. So I'm not sure that many people know this. So there's a lot of talk about how diet influences acne. And most of the studies, people talk about chocolate, people talk about oily foods. The only one that is consistently associated with acne is dairy, actually. And when you think about it, it's not that surprising. Can you think about what milk is, right? It's a substance that comes out of an endocrine organ of an animal. So it's filled with hormones, right? And acne is really, it's a hormonal again, disease isn't really the word, but affliction, I don't know. And, that's why the teenagers get it, and why kids going through these things get it, and why sometimes pregnant women will get acne. And, when you have hormonal changes, it messes your skin up a little bit. And dairy is one of the things that can do that as well. So to me, that's a little bit scary. It scares me that there can be so much hormone in a substance that I'm drinking that it could actually impact my skin. But it's there. And if you do have issues with acne and it's something that you're concerned about, definitely cutting down on dairy is something that I would recommend, as well as apparently high glycemic index foods are also associated with acne, so sugar and flour. And also there's some data that omega-3 fatty acids help. So that's the role of dairy in acne, which I think is really interesting and a little bit scary. I just wanted to add one last thing about calcium supplements. Calcium supplements alone seem to increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, which is heart disease, which is dangerous. So be careful with those. Don't take more than you need. Just get the right amount of calcium. I forget what that is. I'll look up the exact number and get it to you guys, what it should be. Although it'll be different for everyone depending on your diet. The more leafy greens you eat, the more calcium you're getting. And obviously, the more milk you drink, the more calcium you're getting. But I want to talk about something that is really important and that a lot of people don't realize, and that is the role of dairy in prostate cancer. And I think, pretty sure most people don't know this, but calcium increases prostate cancer risk substantially, and it's dangerous. And so men certainly should not be drinking too much milk, and too much milk for a risk of prostate cancer is considered around like 6 cups a day. So if you're getting more than that, and you're male, you should seriously consider cutting back. Obviously, you need to get your recommended calcium from whatever sources you can, but just don't overdo it if you're a male. But the good news is that you can reduce prostate cancer risk. Reduced risk is associated with eating legumes, nuts, and seafood. So hopefully nobody gets prostate cancer from drinking milk. But be careful with that, and tell your loved ones that too much milk can be dangerous. I have friends in the Midwest that will really just like guzzle milk with every meal, and it's not good for men. However, there is some evidence that calcium and even dairy can reduce the risk of colon cancer. So, you win some, you lose some, apparently, with this one. But the data is inconsistent, and I don't feel quite as strongly recommending calcium for colon cancer, and obviously I don't recommend it. You're balancing the risk with the prostate cancer if you're male. So basically, you just want to stay right in that happy zone, which is whatever the FDA recommends for calcium intake. And that you just don't want to go too high or too low, because you risk getting these different cancers that are really unpleasant. I mean, prostate cancer and colon cancer, you don't want those. You definitely don't want those. And I will, like I said before, I will post all the links to all the science that I'm using to base these recommendations on. So there's also been some rumors of the role of dairy in breast cancer. And the data's all over the place, and I know some people are probably going to fight with me on this one, but the data that I believed the most I didn't think there was a very close association between dairy and breast cancer. Unless, however, the cows are given recombinant bovine growth hormone, which is a hormone that was created by Monsanto, which is a big ag company. Most of you have probably heard of Monsanto, that they give to cows that increases milk production. So that actually has been associated with breast cancer. So stay away from cows with the growth hormone. And generally, we'll discuss this a little bit later, but in general, you're best off getting milk from cows that have been pastured, raised on grass-fed cows rather than corn-fed cows or grain and soy-fed cows, because that's going to be much healthier milk when the cows are on their normal diet. So yeah, I'm not convinced about the breast cancer. And there was even actually some studies, I mean, once we're talking about milk that's not from hormone cows, there was even a couple studies, they were both from China, granted, but that the dairy actually reduced the risk of breast cancer. So I saw studies both directions. And so I would say that there's probably no risk there unless you have the hormone. So I also looked into the role of dairy in weight loss, because I've seen that tossed around a lot, even on commercials. That, you know, for a while they were making claims that if you ate their yogurt every morning or whatever, that it would help you lose weight. And I would like to reiterate that this is the kind of data that's highly influenced by the dairy industry, because with the weight loss market is such a big one, and that would sell milk really well if they could prove that. So these are a lot of these studies are funded by the dairy industry. However, so there is some data that there is a lot of data that says that it does help a little bit with weight loss, but what most of that data says is like a correlation. So it's people who drink more milk tend to be thinner or have more success on diets. But when you look down sort of at the nitty gritty, and those are going to be intervention trials where you tell someone to like take milk and see how it affects their body weight. And whenever they did these without a calorie restricted diet, so without putting people on a diet, just giving them milk tends to not make them lose weight. So my guess is like it's not really going to help you that much. However, there's just like not alone. It's not like a diet pill or something like that. But there is some data that having milk or dairy, even other forms of dairy like cheese, can help with appetite, satiety, and stuff like that. And that sort of makes sense to me. And that, because milk is a high protein food, it can have some fat in it, and those are going to be very satiating. And even the carbohydrate in there will be satiating. So it could help you maybe eat less if you are trying to lose weight. So, I mean, you can see what works for you, but there is a little bit of data suggesting that they might help with weight loss. The review I read that I'll post for you guys on the show gave a couple mechanisms for how this could possibly work, how dairy could help lose weight. One of them was the protein and satiation. Another one was the calcium itself, helping with lipogenesis, which is the process of breaking down fat. And also they speculated that conjugated linoleic acid could be involved in helping with fat burning, as well as the medium chain fatty acids that are in there. But of course, you're not going to get medium chain fatty acids from skim milk. So and maybe some other mechanism. But this has not worked out, and I don't think it's anything I would count on personally for weight loss. And okay, and then so I mentioned that's how I feel about weight loss. So I'm going to talk a little bit about cheese. So I mentioned something during the vegan and vegetarian show that I saw a study that cheese helped fight heart disease because of the vitamin K2 that was in it. And I got some people didn't agree with me, weren't very happy about it. But I found the study, it seems pretty credible to me. It's the EPIC study. In the same exact study, they also showed a decreased risk of, cancer, decreased risk of cancer and a decreased risk of heart disease from this special kind of vitamin K, vitamin K2, that is found almost exclusively in cheese products. And then I found another paper that said that cheese might actually be associated with reduced risk of heart disease. So that is so counterintuitive to what anybody will tell you. I think it's funny. Anybody who follows my advice on food isn't going to get heart disease anyway. I'll just post these references up there for you to look at. I think I think it's interesting, and I love data like this that flies in the face of conventional wisdom because, most people will ignore it, but I feel like it's the most interesting data that we should be looking at because, what if we're wrong? What if everybody's wrong about what causes heart disease? And as you probably know, I think they're wrong. I don't think it's saturated fat. So I'll put those up there and you guys can tell me what you think. And if anybody wants to fight with me, I'm happy to have that fight because I don't have any answers. I'm just reporting what I see here. So a couple more things. I don't know if you guys saw last night on the David Letterman show that Jamie Oliver was on there, and he said that one of the flavorings in store-bought ice cream is beaver anal gland, which is hilarious. I'll give you guys the link to this. But, if you need a reason to not eat ice cream, which is a kind of dairy, there's one. And also, the Wikipedia article on milk is really interesting, actually. So if you guys want to read more about this, if you want to learn more about anything that I've mentioned today, I mean, it's not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's pretty interesting. It talks about the homogenization and stuff, which I'll get to in a second. But I liked the Wikipedia article. It's pretty good, and it's not too technical. So I wanted to answer one question before I get to the raw milk topic. So someone asked, can you please explain what nutrients get lost when you boil, pasteurize, or ultra high temperature process or homogenize milk? And then he says, to which temperature should we bring the milk ideally before using? And he says that because he says that he buys raw milk and boils it himself before drinking it, and that the taste and texture are much better even than pasteurized milk as opposed to homogenized pasteurized milk, whereas the ultra high temperature processed milk is totally tasteless. So I'm just going to explain this a little bit. So yes, heating milk definitely changes its properties. And that's what pasteurization is. So the process of pasteurization that makes our milk safe is they heat it to really high levels, and that basically kills all the bacteria. So nothing is in there to grow. So one thing that heating does is kill the bacteria, which is a desired effect. However, it will damage some vitamins, which is what he was asking about. Specifically, it'll mostly damage vitamin C. Natural cow milk is actually really high, like a decent source of vitamin C, but the milk that we get that's been pasteurized and homogenized is not. But that's okay because there's vitamin C in like all fruits and vegetables, tons of it. So it's not like you need milk as a source of vitamin C. But yeah, that gets messed up with the heat. Also, heating milk will denature proteins. So proteins are these molecules that are really long molecules actually, and then they fold up in these cool different shapes. And the shape gives the proteins their function. But they call it the tertiary shape. This is sort of a delicate process. So heating will actually break some of those more delicate bonds, and the protein will unfold, and that's called denaturing a protein. And that will definitely happen with heat, and that can be somewhat problematic because what happens is enzymes are a kind of protein, and so if they get denatured, they no longer function. And so that's good if you want to homogenize the milk after pasteurizing it, because homogenizing milk breaks up the fatty globules, which I'll talk about in a second, and it releases them into the rest of the milk in a free solution. And if the enzymes are there, it'll make it go rancid really quickly. So you never want to homogenize milk without pasteurizing it. And heating milk will also kill the taste. So all that denaturing of the protein and all that elimination of stuff definitely makes the milk taste bad. And so that's why if you're getting your own milk and you're just boiling it briefly, then it's going to taste better than any pasteurized milk you get from the store for sure. And he asked what temperature. Boiling should kill bacteria. As far as I'm aware of, just a quick boil should kill all the bacteria. The problem is when you get to the processed milks and the pasteurized milks that's been pasteurized in a facility, they're going to be a lot hotter than your typical boiling stove. So that's why that milk tastes bad to you. And I think that's a pretty good solution, getting your own raw milk and boiling it. I mean, I've never heard that before, but it sounds like a reasonable hypothesis or a reasonable thing to try. But I'll get into why raw milk is dangerous in a second. So let me just talk about homogenization real quick. So basically, I'm not sure if you guys realize this, but milk is a highly processed product. Basically, they centrifuge it so that all the fat comes out of it, and that's how they can make milk that's all these different percentage of fats, 2%, 1% skim. And that also like, and then they run it through these like tiny little tubes with a high pressure, and it basically breaks it up. And so normally fat has like these big blobs of fat that have lots of vitamins inside, all the fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. They're in the globules of the fat. And so homogenization destroys all that. The only reason there's vitamin D in milk is because they add it back, because people were like getting rickets without it. And so it totally completely changes the molecular property of milk. And when they homogenize it like that, that's how come milk can taste the same all year round. Because if you think about it, milk should be a seasonal product, right? Cows are supposed to eat grass. Grass is only in season, early in the year, from like spring to summer. And then it starts to dry, and then they start eating hay and other winter foods, and that changes the taste of the milk. But that makes it really hard for a milk company to sell it. So they don't want to sell milk that's going to be changing from day to day, depending on what the cow eats and depending on the weather of the season. So they force feed them the grains and the soy, and then they pump them full of hormones, and they get them to produce all this milk, and they mix it all together and homogenize it, and so it's all the same. And so you, as the consumer, are happy because you get the same product every time, but you don't really realize how unnatural that is. Milk is a highly processed food. I'm lactose intolerant mildly, so I don't drink milk. I do eat cheese, and I can have a little bit of yogurt and stuff like that. But that's one of the reasons. I don't think I could ever buy milk myself. That's just my own thing. So let's talk a little bit about raw milk. So I did my best to research about the benefits of raw milk. I know some people are passionate about this. People freak out. They think it's like we're violating their rights by not letting them have raw milk. And so let me just say some of the basic benefits that I found. One is it definitely, like I explained with the pasteurization and homogenation, raw milk, unprocessed milk, fresh from the cow, definitely has more vitamins and nutrients because they haven't been taken out. Some people claim that raw milk boosts immunity, but the reason they argue this is because antibodies from mothers are passed to babies through breast milk, and that's totally true of human babies and cow babies. Whether it's true that cow milk boosts human immunity, the data is not very strong. I didn't see anything that made me think, wow, maybe I should really rethink milk. Maybe I should start drinking it. Because if anybody has any good data on this, please send it to me. But I wasn't convinced by what I saw. Also, if you do have raw milk, definitely you want to make sure, like I said, that it's pastured cows and not the like dairy cows that are eating grains and soy. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the healthy, happy cows because they're going to be cleaner, they're going to be healthier, they're going to be better nourished, and they're going to be less sick in general. And if you're going to be taking the risk of raw milk, and raw milk can be very dangerous. If you're going to be taking that risk, you want to make sure you get the best source you can possibly find. I was going to say something. What is it? Shoot. Anyway, also so those pastured cows are only going to have basically naturally occurring hormones in them, so they're not going to have the growth hormones that might cause breast cancer. Shoot, I just remembered and then I forgot again. Right, lactose intolerance. This is going to talk about. So some people claim, and I've never tried this myself, but some people claim that if you are lactose intolerant, that people can tolerate raw milk because it hasn't been all messed up. Your body can like digest it normally. So that could be true. Others claim, and the milk industry claims that homogenized milk is actually easier to digest. So there's people that argue both sides. I don't know. Some people swear by it. If you go on to Bill Marler's website, he's a food safety attorney. He has lots of data about the dangers of raw milk, and I trust him. He's a good guy, and it's definitely a risk, I think, if you're willing to try raw milk, because it can be contaminated and people die from it every year. This year has actually been really bad, or like the last 12 months have been really bad. So be careful with the raw milk. So be smart about it if you are gonna use it. Awesome. So that's my show. So let's take questions, because I'm sure there are some. And sorry again for all the confusion. I hope you guys can still hear and see me. Seems to be going okay. So any questions? So there's a little ask a question button in the corner. It should be red, and you can either type a text question to me or call in and chat with me. Or you can ask questions in the chat, because I'm here. Can somebody just say hi so I know that you can still see me? Oh, here, good. We are getting questions. Awesome. Yeah, sure. No problem. It looks like it cut out when I was talking about calcium and vitamin D in relation to bone density. So this is really important, actually. So calcium supplements alone actually are bad. So they will increase bone density, but the bones will be more brittle, and fractures actually increase. So you don't want that. That's a problem. Instead, however, this seems to be fixed if you have sufficient vitamin D in your supplement. Like I said before, calcium supplements do increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, and in men they cause prostate cancer. So I would definitely don't go overboard with your calcium supplementation if you're going to use supplements. And if you do, make sure you have adequate vitamin D. And I take 4,000 IU of vitamin D, because I live in San Francisco. I get in the sun as much as I can, but there's not much to get in, so it's not often. And I got my vitamin D tested about a year ago, and it was super low. I mean, those reports that came out that said that most people have adequate vitamin D, mine wasn't nearly, it was like half what it was supposed to be. So I take 4,000 IU of supplements of vitamin D. And actually, it's been great. My fingernails grow like crazy. My hair's been growing like crazy. My skin looks pretty. Like, I highly recommend the vitamin D. So so she says it's the same in Wisconsin. Yeah, if you don't get the sun, I don't see any reason to not take vitamin D. You really have to take a lot for it to be bad, is what we're learning. Awesome. Thank you, Abigail. Does anybody drink raw milk? Is that anybody, or was anybody curious about it? Did I cover that adequately? I don't know. I know people are really passionate about it, and I wish I couldn't find good data. I couldn't find good data that it was good. It was all sort of hand wavy. Most of the data, or most of the literature from raw milk enthusiasts that I found was, it's not bad, it's not unsafe. All those studies are bogus that said it was unsafe. And I first of all don't really believe that. And also that doesn't help me say why I should have it. So anything else? Seems like we have people coming in and out. No. Soldier. What's up? I know you guys want to talk about something. Remember. Well, if we don't want to talk about anything, it is way past my dinner time, so we could just call it. I've tortured you long enough. Sorry again for all the technical difficulties. I'll have Comcast come back. I thought we had it fixed, but I will fix it again, because that's what we do here. So yeah, like I said, I will post all the references to the studies that I read for this on the show notes. That'll be up next week. I'll try to put it up next Monday or Tuesday, and get this video to you guys as soon as possible. And also, so office hours reminder is again tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'll just be online, hanging out, ask me anything, chat about anything. And I do record office hours, so I have the one from last time. There was there's some editing that needs to be done that I just haven't had time to do. But I'll get those, and I'll figure out some place to post them. I'm not sure where yet, but I'll find a place for you guys to watch those. Awesome. So thank you guys for tuning in to Summer Tomato Live. Sorry again for the complications. The next episode, if you want to participate live, is scheduled for Tuesday, April 26th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we are going to be talking about probiotics, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be awesome, and I hope to see you there. If you want to participate, sign up at tinyletter.com/summertomato. Thanks, guys. Over and out.